The dopamine industrial complex is essentially the conglomeration of powers, whether it's businesses, governments, religions, culture, all of these things that are working together to play on your dopaminergic system in order to gain some kind of resource from you. Usually it's money, could be your time, could be your beliefs. This includes things like porn, drugs, video games, social media, streaming, junk food, and consumerism.
That makes sense because all these things profit from self-indulgence. These are all things that are made to pleasure that one singular person, which is yourself. It's meant to get your money and your attention and your time and everything and focus it on these items.
Welcome to the Masculine Spirit Podcast, where we discuss masculine development, spirituality, and potential from a Christian perspective. I'm Robert Krause, and I'm joined by Noah Bills. Today's discussion will examine the societal forces that diminish, distort, and destroy masculinity in the modern world. So we're going to be looking at a lot of different things that men struggle with, that attempt to target men and to take away some of the power from people in today's world. So I think it should be a pretty interesting discussion today.
Things that diminish masculine roles and kind of the importance of why we need to maintain these things.
Sure, and that includes toxic masculinity as well, because, we don't want to encourage people to be dominating forces and, abusing people, oppressing people. Sometimes that is associated with masculinity, but I would argue that's not true masculinity.
Exactly. I would say it's not like about being a dominant force as much as it is being like an overbearing and manipulative force with your masculinity. Because obviously, like, having dominion can be like a good thing if you are a caretaker, if you are the person that provides. But in the instances where you're using it to abuse and take advantage of other people, that's where the toxic masculinity lies.
Exactly. Yeah. So Romans 12:2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." I've always loved this verse. It's a very, very reassuring verse because it shows us how God actually reshapes our mind when we accept the truth of Christ and accept the revelation that he's given to us.
I also like the bit where it says, that by testing we discern what exactly the will of God is. It's we've kind of touched on this before with the old concept of, trial by fire, that we are put through these trials and tribulations because it helps expose to us what is like the goodness into the world. What is the things that we need to strive for? What are the things that we are fighting against? Without those sorts of struggles, we don't really have that vision or that perception of the good and evil in the world.
That's true. The struggles that we go through allow us to have experiences where we're able to test test what the will of God is, because through our experiences, we're able to learn maybe something that we thought in the past was what God was willing for us actually was us being guided by our own will instead.
Helps you discern between what you think is God's will and what it actually is.
Yeah, and this verse also highlights a very prevalent issue today, which is society trying to conform us in a bunch of different ways. There's so many different powers and principalities that are vying for our attention, vying for our engagement, to whether it's to get money from us or to change our perspective on something. We have to be very cognizant of those things. Otherwise, they will begin to control us in subtle ways that we won't even notice.
And I mean, the conformity of this world, the things that it's trying to do to us, that's the big topic of today, the things that we're kind of trying to expose and discuss. Item number 1, dopamine industrial complex. Do you care to describe the dopamine industrial complex as you see it?
Well, first I want to know, have you heard that term before?
Industrial complexes of other types, yes. Like, I know the general industrial complex theme, but
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a term that is kind of primarily popular in certain internet circles, which I fell into. Not that it's a bad thing, but just, you go down certain YouTube rabbit holes and stuff and people talk about certain topics. But in this community on the internet, the dopamine industrial complex is essentially the conglomeration of powers, whether it's businesses, governments, those are the two big ones. Even it could be religions, culture, all of these things that are,
communities, for sure.
the things that are working together to play on your dopaminergic system in order to gain some kind of resource from you. Usually it's money, could be your time, could be your beliefs. But yeah, this includes things like porn, drugs, video games, social media, streaming, junk food, and consumerism. Those are just some things that I have listed, but the list goes on and on.
Consumerism as a whole, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense because, all these things, they all just profit from you just in self-indulgence. These are all things that are made to pleasure that one singular person, which is yourself. It's meant to get your money and your attention and your time and everything and just focus it on these items. The more you are focused on just streaming services and eating junk food and just on all these other stuff, all these consumerist type things that allows them to make profit off of it. And they really like money. They really like having all that money that you're giving them. So anything that like abuses the chemicals in your brains to make you want it more and more, it's definitely a huge issue. And in terms of masculinity, that just pulls you away from the rest of the responsibilities you have in the world, like everything that you should be focusing on, which we've talked extensively about, the things you should be focusing on and like how to go about that, how to develop yourself. But these are many various ways to just kind of get you to stop or delay it. Not to say that indulging in these things is a bad thing. It's all about moderation. I indulge in lots of these things. I'm sure you do as well. We can't be active forces all the time. I don't think we were built to work 24/7 or be like some crazy outgoing skilled person, just always improving themselves. We need that downtime in these things, but it's the moderation that is incredibly powerful. Having moderation not only limits you from doing these things that are ultimately detrimental to you, but it also shows you character. It shows that you are a person who has the ability to get yourself out of these things. It shows that you're able to control yourself, that you're able to give yourself downtime, but you also have the ability to go out and do the things that you need to do in the world.
Yeah, and all these things are habit forming, which I think is a huge reason why these companies put so much money and so much time into marketing all of these things. If you can get somebody to form a habit where they are giving you their time and money as a business, that is incredibly powerful. That's how all of these giant companies are profiting so much, because people form a habit, whether it's porn, video games, social media. It's something that they continually do all the time, and it's just a loop that keeps feeding back into itself.
It's all those subscription-based services, dude. You're paying for it every month for the rest of your life.
Even if it's not something that you're paying for, people are profiting off of the ads.
It's giving your attention to anything, gives people money, creates ad space, and ad space is money.
Yeah. So the main thing is you want to have control over your dopamine system, your dopaminergic system, if you will.
Dopaminergic system. I love that word.
I'm not a neurologist. So yeah, because when you can break your dopamine free from these things and direct it towards what you want, it's so much more powerful, because you're actually able to use that dopamine system to your advantage, instead of waking up every day and like thinking, oh, when's the next time I'm going to get to play a video game? You're thinking, oh, how soon can I get into the gym? How soon can I, go make some money? All these things that are more productive. You can just take the same neurological system and just direct it in a different direction.
Sure. In the end, it's just self-discipline is the biggest thing, I think, when it comes to, dopamine control. It's all about, are you looking for fast fixes that are ultimately going to be detrimental to you in the end, or are you going to go for something that's a little bit slower, but is a lot more like cathartic and a lot more rewarding? Those are choices you make for yourself in the end. And all I could do is give you the best advice from my own standpoint, but definitely try to foster something that takes time and, you might receive criticism for, or that, you're not going to succeed at immediately. Those things, I think, put the best results in the end and have good everlasting rewards.
Yeah, it's difficult. The modern world makes it incredibly difficult with all these different things that are vying for our attention. I think
All these podcasts people are listening to, stop listening to podcasts.
Yeah. You go do something productive with your life. Stop listening to the Masculine Spirit podcast.
This podcast is brought to you by...
Yeah, exactly. Brought to you by Netflix and Hot Cheetos. But no, the modern world makes it very difficult to direct your attention in in an intentional way where you want it to go. I think in some ways in the past, you go back 100 years, 200 years, this was easier. Your life was much simpler. You didn't have a phone in your hand telling you all the latest news updates, new videos dropping from your favorite YouTubers. You probably just lived on a farm.
Notifications all this time, yeah.
Yeah, you were just with your family, cooking, taking care of the cattle, just doing your everyday thing, which is obviously a blessing and a curse, because we didn't have nearly the same amount of access to information that we have now.
Yeah. Very obvious pros and cons.
Yeah. I think the key in the modern age is to realize that the con is that we have all these things vying for our attention, and it's very difficult to combat that. But the pro is that we have all this information, and we need to take advantage of it and use it to the benefit of those around us and to the benefit of ourselves as well.
Sure. It is, like I said, it is very difficult because there's just so much going on, and there's so many things that kind of are worthy of our attention in the sense, like there are many things like I could find myself scrolling on social media all the time because there's so many cool things that I find and see going on, but you really just have to cut yourself from that sometimes. You shouldn't just be like consuming these things. You should be, more learning and adapting and developing than just consuming.
Definitely. It's very easy to sit back and watch other people's lives vicariously, and you get the dopamine, you get a little taste of that experience, but you get none of the fulfillment, none of the experiential knowledge, none of the true benefit from it.
Yep, 100%.
This gets us into another area of something that poses an obstacle to masculine excellence, which, especially in America, this is a huge thing, which is political division. Obviously, right now, we are at the start of Donald Trump's second term. A lot of people have a lot of feelings about that, and it's very controversial. It's always controversial. There's always some kind of political scandal, some kind of political controversy going on. And kind of similar to the dopamine industrial complex, you could even say this is part of the dopamine industrial complex. The fact that
I would agree.
There are some people that just spend so much of their time focusing on these political issues that they think have a lot of control, a lot of power in their lives, but really it doesn't have much effect, and it would just serve them better to focus on other things.
For sure. I mean, modern American politics is like a circus these days. I feel like 90% of the things I see that are related to our current presidents are just small, little dumb things that don't even really matter politically. The amount of times I've seen posts about President Biden, and it's just him falling down some stairs, or just him having a crazy speech impediment. It's these things are just built to create political division without any real merit or any even real politics being involved at all. And I feel like there's a lot of media that kind of serves to do that sort of thing. And political division is part of what makes our current political system so difficult to grasp onto. Is a lot of people treat it like a binary, you're either crazy conservative or crazy liberal, and there's no in between. If you vote one way, that means you're extremist that way, and people will often not see you as any form of in the middle. There's no gradient, there's no nothing. Like I said, it's a binary. But that division is incredibly detrimental to our communities and our society, because it creates labels. It puts labels on people. It basically just says, oh, you voted for this person, that means you're going for A, B, and C, all these things that I hate. So that means I hate you because you did that one small thing. Even though realistically, I don't think, most of us have a complete understanding of what's going on in our political system and just in the government in general. Like, I can't claim that I have great knowledge of it by any means. I'm not a crazy political person, but it's really easy to see how bad political division is just affecting us in general. The inability to create community with people on both sides makes it very difficult for us to just kind of come together and actually discuss these kind of issues in a humane manner. All it is, like I said before, it's just labeling people. It's calling people out for being monsters and demonizing them so we don't have to listen to them, instead of actually coming together and trying to come up with new ideas or other things to combat this, being somewhere on the gradient that isn't extreme one way or the other. That form of communication would be incredibly beneficial for us. It would allow us to learn from each other, allow us to bring up each other and create better communities. We need more leaders and activists and people, both masculine and feminine, who are willing to come together like this and talk about these issues without it being so demonizing.
Definitely. It's always something that stifles true conversation when you hear people start attacking each other's characters rather than the arguments the person is making. It's not a good thing. So we want to foster those kind of conversations where you can come together with somebody who disagrees with you and have a productive conversation. I know it's crazy, man. You can actually do that. You can talk to someone with completely opposite political views to you in a respectful way, and also come away feeling like it was productive and it benefited both of you in some way.
I mean, I can see how it's difficult to do that sometimes, but like, there are a lot of people that start off these things very disrespectful, and I can understand those instances where, the only drive is to meet that disrespect with more disrespect, but it's really something that you just step away from and don't engage with because it just feeds into bad habits.
Or you can tell when someone is going into an interaction in bad faith from the jump. But I think most people understand that most of the time, especially when we're talking about presidential elections, we're in a lesser of two evils situation. That's something people have been saying for a long time. And I think it's true. I think, of course you have people that are like super pro Kamala, super pro Trump, like they just love them absolutely. But I think most of the common sense people in America are like, well, I don't really like either one of them that much, but I'll choose the one who espouses my views the most, I guess. And you go from there. Like,
I think that's where like 90% of people were feeling about this election based off people I talked to. Nobody was super enthusiastic about the specific candidate. I think most people were just voting to go against the other candidate. It is also very telling of American politics that it's not about voting for who you want. It's about voting against who you don't want, which is amazing. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, how do you think that this overly dramatized and overly emphasized piece of American culture in politics negatively affects men?
I think it makes it very difficult for you to kind of form your own ideas about these things. Like I said, like, it's so polarized that it's very extremist one way or another. I think this prevents young men, and I think just everybody in general, from just kind of looking at these issues ourselves, not looking at what people are saying on social media, not looking at what people are saying on the news, but kind of going in, seeing the actions of these politicians for yourselves and forming your own opinions on them, and actually like making an educated decision on who you think would better lead the country based off current world affairs, our own current state affairs, intrastate affairs, everything like that. I will admit that is very difficult to do. That's something that I personally can't really keep up with a lot because there's so many moving parts. But I think I think what it does also is it kind of puts us in a place of like complacency. Like, it feels very, how do I put it? Like, puts us out of a position of power to be so far removed from what's actually going on and what things appear to be happening. Also, just the fact that our votes are very minimal as an individual is very demoralizing when it comes to like being involved with these sorts of things. So I think the struggle with men is the engagement and the inability to see what's actually going on and what we should be striving for as a country politically in the long run. Trying to make the right decision. It's very difficult to make the right decision. I can't tell you, exactly what the right decision would be politically. What I do know is I just don't really trust a lot of current politicians, so it's difficult to get involved.
See, and that's a big issue with the system, is that nobody has any trust in it. So why would you want to participate and put time into a system that you don't trust? Which is a question I ask myself. I mean, I vote. But like, am I the type of person who would be like, it's your moral obligation to vote. You have to, otherwise you're not doing your duty as a citizen. Like, I guess I kind of believe that to some extent, but also like, I completely understand because we can't really see a lot of what's happening. Our votes don't have that much power, if any. And it's just demoralizing. So people move away from politics and they decide to focus on themselves. And I can't fault them for that. They're probably gonna be doing much more productive things during that time that they are focusing on just improving themselves and bettering their family and that kind of thing.
Honestly, in my own personal perspective, since it's very difficult for me to get involved politically, I believe for me personally that the changes that I want to see, in my local communities, in my cities, in my state, and therefore in my country ultimately, are the changes that I make with people like face to face. Like, I think in the end, the biggest changes that you see in a country or anywhere are the cultural changes. Like the things that will ultimately impact politics are the things that we decide and agree on as a single people, as one culture. If you want to see changes made, you have to kind of start and foster culture change within your own communities. For me, that's my political engagement, is I try to foster these ideas and morals that I would like to see in other people and that I would like to see implemented in our own country. Because it's either just my one vote in a state that's always voting liberal no matter what my vote is, or I could foster a community of people to believe similarly to me. If they decide to think similarly to me, and then that's my active ability of making change in the area around us and in the country as a whole. Not to say that my actions are creating these, countrywide sweeps of moral changes and indecisiveness or anything, but yeah, it's just the way I see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the single individual actions of thousands and millions of people that shape the culture. So it is important. That's a very important observation, is that culture arguably has more power than politics in the world. Culture is what influences how people act, the things that people value, the things that they chase, that they put time into. And based on those values, the cultural values that people have, that moves the entire country in a certain direction.
And I mean, what you vote for in your own actions can be completely different. There's the old stories of, these rich conservative men that will, vote against abortions, but when they have a mistress that gets pregnant and they don't want to have that kid, that they ship them out of state where it's legal to get an abortion, and they make them have it. It's like, yeah. What are you really standing for? Like, it's more, I think it's, 90% your own actions rather than just like what you vote for. They're not the same.
No, not at all. Not at all. Hypocrisy is a huge issue in politics. That's one reason why people don't have very much trust in the system.
Just one of the reasons, yeah.
Just one of many reasons. Well, I also wanted to talk about this little concept called moral relativism, otherwise known as the devil incarnate. No, but I mean, I really do believe that to some extent. I think that...
How do you define moral relativism, just so you and I are on the same page?
Sure. Moral relativism is the belief that morals and ethics, what is right and wrong, is not objective, does not have any objective source, and is completely subjective based on what an individual experiences.
I mean, I would say moral relativism as a concept is true. Like, there are people who do agree to their own morals based off their own experiences. They develop their own moral codes. But whether or not, I do not agree that there's more than one moral way to live life. I feel like there is, very strict things that we should have as a society in terms of morals. A lot of the things, obviously, in the Bible and in the Christian way, I consider morally right, and anything against that, I would consider morally wrong. So I agree that there is objectivism to it, but there are definitely a lot of people that believe it to be a lot more subjective. From an individual standpoint, I can see the subjectivism, but that's not what I would want to foster. I feel like as a society, we need a moral object. We need to be striving for the same things if we want to succeed for ourselves and for others in our communities.
If we as a culture accept moral relativism and we accept that morality is truly subjective, it puts us in all these moral conundrums that we have to face, which is like, the Aztec tribes said that it was okay to sacrifice your children to their gods. Does that mean that they were actually moral in doing that. There's countless examples, like criminals. A lot of criminals believe they're doing the right thing when they take advantage of other people. Does that actually mean that they're right? Like, did they do nothing wrong? It's
If you're Robin
very...
Hood and you take advantage of people who take advantage of even more people, are you morally right?
You could be.
If you're Luigi Mangione and you shoot the CEO of Healthcare United.
Yeah, I don't think I have enough information on that one to really know the extent, but
I'm anti-violence anyways, so I guess it's difficult.
Yeah, I would say unless your life is immediately in danger, I would not endorse killing anybody.
But no, yeah, your argument makes sense. Like, it's almost kind of like, because I feel like within like a community or society, like morals are set as like objective within that community. Like when you have a community that says A, B, and C to that community, those morals are objective. It's when you introduce more or opposing ideas that it starts becoming subjective. So moral relativism kind of feels like an oxymoron, if I'm using that term correctly.
In what sense?
In that morals, like I said before, like within a community, like the idea of morals are objective. Like within that one community, whatever they have as a moral standing is their objective truth. So the idea that morals are relative kind of feels like contrary to that one community.
See, and what you're saying is like in this community, their morals are objective. But when we're talking about objective, we're talking about something that can apply to the entire universe, to everybody. So like you can't have something that is just objective for one group and then something else is objective for somebody else. That just means that it's all subjective at the end.
I agree in the sense that like objective does imply like a single kind of universal law in the sense that like it is indefinitely true. But I think a lot of people will consider their morals objective, whether or not it is actually objective. And then, in the sense of like the Mayans thing, sacrificing kids to their gods would not consider that objective, but to them, it was pretty objective if they were willing to sacrifice their children to their gods, So it's in that kind of sense. I mean, it is obviously morals are very like abstract, so it is kind of difficult to define these things as objective or relative, but there is a lot of divisiveness involved when you start colliding these morals. So, moral relativism, I agree with you, is a detrimental thing because it's contrary ideas that do not mix together whatsoever. Like it's got to be one or the other. We obviously align ourselves as Christians and our moral objectivity lies within God and the Bible, and anything contrary to that is not really acceptable, and it's something that is difficult to work with or deal with because it's there's completely contrary ideas that we live with and other people live with.
Yeah, I think moral relativism makes it very hard to have conversations with people about ethics because obviously with us coming from a biblical perspective, that's where our morals are going to come from. But we can have discussions with, say, like a Muslim or even an atheist who does believe that there is true morality and that, there is some ideal that exists that we should be striving for as humans. But when you're speaking to somebody who is a moral relativist, it's like you're coming from one worldview that is completely incompatible with their worldview. Because essentially they're saying that there is no morality. If morality is subjective, then there is no morality. Unless each person's subjective experience of morality that is expressed in different ways actually means that they're doing the right thing and fulfilling their purpose, if that makes sense. Which,
it's just the contrast of these things. It just doesn't work out. And somebody who, I guess, would be a practitioner of moral relativism, to me, it sounds like they just don't really have like a moral alignment. Like they don't necessarily like have strong beliefs in anything. And I think that in itself is also detrimental. I feel like strong beliefs is a really powerful driving force in our lives and helps propel us forward in, so many different ways for our own and others' benefits.
I think for men specifically, having a strong moral center is, like you said, something that propels us forward, something that calls us out to slay the dragon, if you will. Like why would we put ourselves through all this suffering and toil and building and character reformation if we didn't believe that it was ultimately good and had some kind of ultimate purpose? Yeah, this is why I despise moral relativism. A PSA.
Then it's like, what are you living for? Like, what are you doing here if you don't have strong drive or moral implications or anything going on? Like, you're just kind of existing. You're just existing, bro. Come on. What are you
You
existing
can do better
for?
than that.
You can do better than that. Do this for yourself. Do this for others. Do this for your mom or your dad or your sister or whatever. Do it for God.
Speaking of reasons that people do things, money and greed and materialism. This is a big thing. We kind of did a whole episode on it if you want to check that out. The gratitude versus greed.
For sure. Probably just do like a spark notes of that
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, it's relevant here as well, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, materialism is just kind of like to me, it's kind of like a distraction. Um, again, not to say that like we aren't allowed distractions. Like I think it's completely fine to have these things that give us reprieve and just make us happy, help us like come down from a tough day of responsibility and all these other things. But it's another one of those things where it's just kind of about moderation. I think this materialism, is linked pretty heavily to the dopamine industrial complex, where it's more about the things and giving us like those little dopamine, those instant dopamine hits, rather than, working towards developing something more meaningful than just having things. For me personally, having things does not have a lot of merit to me. Obviously there are some things that I strive to have later in life for security and home purposes and for having a family and whatever, but I personally am not going to be the type of guy that strives for supercars anytime soon or a yacht. Not to say that there's anything inherently wrong with owning those things, but materialism can drive people to do crazy things and to make sacrifices of your maybe of other people's behalf, or make sacrifices on your own behalf that you shouldn't be making just for the sake of having material goods. And that's just something you kind of have to evaluate and, see for yourself, is this a healthy thing I want, or is it an unhealthy thing that I want?
Yeah, I think materialism manifests in primarily two different ways. You have the one person on one hand who is in debt, always buying stuff. They're always shopping on Amazon. Maybe they're buying luxury clothing, watches, whatever that they can't afford, and they're going into debt. They're not making any financial progress in life, so to speak. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the person who is super rich and only wants to get richer and is doing everything in their power to climb the ladder. And, you have that whole thing. So there's kind of this dichotomy between those two things, which obviously you don't want to fall into either one of those. Yeah, and like you said, men, well, for anyone, but, specifically for men, this is a distraction from the main mission in life. Your main mission in life is to support the people around you, to develop yourself spiritually, to bring glory to God, develop your relationship with God. Materialism is not going to help you get there. It's going to hinder you. Next one is sexual weakness.
Nah, I don't have sexual weakness. We can skip this one. I don't think it's relevant.
Yeah. Sounds like you're in denial, buddy.
No, yeah, sexual weakness is obviously a big one. Again, I would also argue, well, actually, this isn't the dopamine industrial complex issue, but this is definitely still a dopamine issue. A lot of modern, honestly, like, I think like 90% of modern struggles have to do with like dopamine issues. It's just all these things that have become easily and readily available to us that give us temporary satisfaction, with no longevity and no real purpose, but just kind of masks, whatever we have going on inside. Sexual weakness is definitely a big part of that. I don't know if you guys have heard, there's these apps that you could go on, dating apps, to list a few, Tinder. I don't know if you've heard of Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, yada, yada, yada. I think there's a Latino one, Chisme, I want to say, for Latinos, if you're into that.
You would know that.
But there is more and more of the ability to pursue relationships that are purely frivolous and sexual in nature. And of course, that's just another dopamine fix. It's another form of addiction. It's just another area where you can just kind of let yourself go and not really kind of face all these issues that are driving you to just go for dopamine hits. Because I think in the end, for most of us, when we have these issues of moderation or heavy indulgences, it's because we're trying to mask other internalized problems that we have.
Part of the way that I like to see it is that your sexuality is kind of like this beast, like this stallion that you need to tame. You know, if you let your sexuality run rampant, you're going to be hooking up with people that you're going to regret hooking up with later. You're going to be watching porn, masturbating way too much. Not that any is good. Way too much. It's going to be unrestrained because we're men. We have very intense sexual desires at times. In this modern world, we have access to so many things that just want to satisfy those desires for us as quickly and as cheaply as possible without any deeper connection. So in order to tame that beast, as I was saying,
Tame the beast.
It's a process of, restricting yourself from doing these things that ultimately don't bring you true fulfillment, and having the patience, having the discipline to be able to release those sexual desires in different ways. I know that a lot of people, when they start going to the gym, they're able to, manage those desires a little bit better because working out is obviously a physical thing that you do with your body, and it kind of lets out some of that energy, some of that raging testosterone that all my boys got. We stay teed up, but yeah, it's a process, and you have to be willing to respect yourself with your sexuality. I think a lot of the easy and cheap sexual gratification that we have access to, when you engage in that, it ultimately just demonstrates a lack of self-respect. So respect yourself.
Yeah, I mean, from my own personal experience and from talking to numerous other people, the act of constantly engaging in like one night stands or hookups and stuff, like it's never fulfilling. It sounds good in the moment, and probably feels good in the moment as well, but the aftermath is never what you want it to be. You're never really getting that kind of connection that I think a lot of us kind of really want in the end, like the true like intimacy and vulnerability of having a romantic partner. Like, you're supplementing it in these like quick little bursts, but it makes it more difficult, I think, to actually foster a good, healthy relationship with somebody who you find in life that is actually worthy of that. Kind of just drags you down, might warp your perception of what is desirable in a person or not, both, romantically and sexually. It's just not the healthiest thing to go about, surprisingly. If you're not feeling like, I'll say this, like if you've been hooking up with like a lot of people and you don't feel bad about it, it's still likely that the people that you are hooking up with are feeling bad about it, and it's something that they regret. It's a two-way street. I doubt, all these people that are engaging in this feel completely fulfilled with every single person that they've had that vulnerability with. In the end, maybe you're getting taken advantage of, or you're kind of just ending up taking advantage of somebody else because they're in that weakened state where they just want to feel wanted for that one time, and they just ghost them and never talk to them again. It's, that's a nice little cycle. I think that's really good for their mental health, actually. Just ghost them.
Even if you're not experiencing the negative effects of that lifestyle right now, when you decide to finally settle down with somebody and maybe get married, which most people do, you might not think you're going to right now, but most people end up there. It's going to be much harder to initiate that sexual chemistry with that one woman because you're so used to having this smorgasbord of women at your fingertips. Well, I don't know if that's not everybody's experience, but you know what I'm saying. You're so used to all this variety and stuff. It's going to make it very difficult to settle down with one woman, even if she is the one that you truly love and you truly have this spiritual connection with. You've dug yourself into this hole that you have to climb out of because of all those previous sexual experiences. Well, next obstacle on the list is financial immobility, which is something that a lot of people experience, I think, with the minimum wage not being great. I mean, in California, it's pretty good, but the cost of living is also super high here. The cost of living is high. But yeah, you have a lot of people in these jobs who are working full time. They're putting in good work, but still not really able to provide, at least in the way that they want to, for their family or even for themselves, which is sad. It's obviously demotivating to people that are in that situation. And I think, part of the reason for this is that, women are in the workforce now, which is a good thing. But with that, now we see a lot more dual income homes, and I think that has allowed companies to be able to pay workers less because people aren't relying on one sole income anymore. They're like, oh yeah, everybody's working. The mom and the dad are working, so we can pay them less and they'll still be fine.
Everybody has more money, so like they can handle a little less, right? You can jack up the prices of everything because everyone's getting a little more income.
Exactly. But what if your wife doesn't want to work? What if you're in a place where you're not going to work, but your wife really wants to work? Then you have one income.
While everyone else is living off the dual income. Yeah, it's especially tricky, I think, in California or other expensive states where, the job markets have not been great. Some people that I've been talking to in a few different industries, it's really difficult to get your hands on a good job. I think, because a lot of people want to move to California, so there's people from out of state who have experience in these things, which makes it hard for people with no experience who already live here to get those jobs. B, the cost of living is obviously really high, so it just kind of forces you to work harder in order to get the bare minimum. And then C, I think there's just a lot more things to spend money on that a lot of us are willing to spend money on that makes it difficult to manage kind of your finances in a better way.
That's very true.
I don't want to be that guy that does the whole spiel about your avocado toast every morning and your coffee every day and all that stuff. But I think there are a lot of things that we don't really realize that are sucking money out of us that we don't necessarily need. That kind of just makes it harder for us to, reach some of the financial goals that we want. It's also just I think there's a lot of people with a sense of complacency, where they are in their current job. I won't blame somebody for enjoying the current status of their job, even if it is low paying, but if it gets them what they want out of it, it's cool and fine. But it can create a lot of financial challenges if it is a low paying position. A lot of people that work with kids or in the education system, they do it because of their love for the job, because they enjoy, working in those environments, and it's super cool and it's very necessary. And it's also just super sucky that those jobs don't pay well.
Sure. And this is kind of a side point, but I think something that anyone can do in order to offset this lack of financial mobility is start to invest. Even if you don't have that much money, even if you can only put in $10, $20, do what you can. Just start investing and that will grow. I'm not a financial advisor, but that is the piece of financial advice that I would give to everyone is invest and invest early and keep doing it. Yeah.
I mean, it's a very difficult thing, I think, to invest. You have to know exactly what to put your money in. I think that's more just something you have to research for yourself. But I agree in the end, I think the wealthiest people in the world, they're wealthy because they know how to let their money make money. Putting all your money in a bank is the worst thing that you can do for it. You're not allowing it to grow in the ways that it has the potential to. Obviously, you need to do these things smart and in an educated manner, but it can be very fruitful. And not even just investing money, investing your time into something is also obviously incredibly helpful. If you invest your time into cooking, you become a really good at-home chef, then you're likely spending a lot less money going out for food when you can just make really good meals at home. You spend your time developing some sort of craft or skill, and now what you're doing on weekends for fun, you're selling on Etsy for a little bit of extra cash. There are ways to get money off of your hobbies and habits, or just save money off of those things if that is a really big struggling point for you. Like I said before, you can be a relatively lower class, not wealthy person and be completely content with your life, and that's perfectly fine too, as long as your needs are met, your family's needs are met, and everything else. I think that's all you really need.
That's a beautiful life. That's a perfectly satisfactory life, I would think.
If I was making just enough for my needs and my family's needs, and I liked my job and everything, I think I would feel pretty content.
Well, transitioning from the finance side of things into the physical fitness side of things, we have sedentary lifestyles as an obstacle to masculine excellence. It's very easy to be sedentary nowadays. There's lots of things you can do while you're
right
sitting
now.
down. Yeah, dude, what are we doing? I should have got a standing desk, dude. What am I thinking?
Yeah, I should be doing curls this entire time.
Yeah, yeah. Never be sedentary. Always be moving.
I think one of the big issues with being sedentary is that these days a lot of jobs and occupations are very sedentary. And even if you're sitting at a desk all day, as someone who's done work like that, it's still really exhausting. It really sucks because you're pretty much doing nothing with your body all day, and by the end of it, you just like can't get yourself to do anything else. It's something that's very difficult, I think, to get a handle of. I know people that go from active jobs to like desk jobs, and even though they're spending a lot less time moving around at the desk jobs, like they're still equally, if not more tired from all the mental work and just, they bent over a laptop or whatever, just looking at sheets all day and all that stuff. It is a very difficult thing to uphold, but I think it's also very obvious to state that a non-sedentary lifestyle, having some form of fitness routine and consistency, has amazing health benefits for you, both mentally and physically, that can expand your life by several years. It can make the last decades of your life a lot more active than other people. You'll be in a much better state. You won't be going crazy by the time you're 70 or whatever. Like you could see it. Like I had a professor of mine who was like in his 70s, but he swims like 3 or 4 miles a day. He's a very active guy, very healthy, both mentally and physically.
Legend.
Yeah. And on the flip side, there's other people in their 70s that like can barely get up and walk around by themselves. Not to knock on those people. Like we all have our different health issues that arise, besides being the sedentary or not sedentary. But if you do want to have a more healthy, long-lasting, and beneficial life, trying to put some form of non-sedentary work into your lifestyle is incredibly beneficial.
Yeah, I think on a whole, modern lifestyles have become much more sedentary than what they used to be. I go back to the example of when I was talking about 100 or 200 years ago, people working on a farm. This was very common. And the common people were doing manual labor all the time, probably for insane hours because there weren't the same labor regulations. But that's besides the point. The point is our lifestyles have become to the point where they don't really require us to move very much, certainly not in very strenuous ways. And so we have to set aside time to go to the gym. We have to get a gym membership. We have to drive to the gym. Like, in the past, it was just a facet of everyday life that just happened. Physical activity was just something that people did naturally as a part of their work. Now it's like something that we have to be proactive about doing outside of work most of the time. It's an interesting change in society.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I mean, even like with those types of jobs they were, as much as they kept your body active, they were still very damaging because you're likely doing the same movements over and over and you're overstressing your body in certain ways. There are ways to keep your body active and still be actively destroying it. Rest for your body is still incredibly important. Like it's not about going out to the gym for 4 hours a day and going crazy on the weights every single day. If you're not allowing yourself to recover, there is a lot of detriment to that as well. Again, it's a balance thing and a moderation thing, surprisingly, but I agree that the lifestyles have changed drastically over the years, and we do need to make compensations for it if we want to have longer lasting and more fulfilling lives.
Sure, and there's just countless benefits to being physically active as opposed to not. As men, we're going to see testosterone go up. We're going to see more energy, less pain, better emotional regulation, better sleep regulation, less fat, less risk for cardiovascular events to occur. It's just like, the list just goes on and on. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse at this point. If you're not working out, at least a little bit, and don't be ashamed to start with a little bit. But if you're not doing that, you are leaving so much on the table. This last topic is bit of a controversial one. The gender wars. When you hear the term gender wars, what comes to your mind, Noah?
I don't know. In my head, it kind of sounds like the title of a reality TV show, where it's like a game show where it's like men against women. And they have to like answer questions and do random, like, I don't know, just random puzzles and stuff and see who wins. Who's gonna win tonight on Gender Wars? 7 p.m. Eastern.
Dude, you should be a writer. I'll get you a spot on NBC. I know a guy.
But no, I guess I guess like gender wars to me is just kind of the concept of people on either side like having active discourse against the opposite gender for A, B, and C reasons. I know there's a lot of attack on masculinity, specifically toxic masculinity, because that is very prevalent in some areas, and we see it in a lot of modern cultures, and it is something that should be called out. You also see these things on the other side, men calling out women for other activities that they don't like or enjoy. To me, I don't think it's like, to me, it's not like a crazy big issue, because I feel like a lot of the points they bring up, like, it just kind of goes back to like the labels and polarizing thing, where you're just taking a single action you saw of a person online and trying to apply it to a broad scape of people without there being a lot of validity to it. I see it more, like I said, as an act of polarization and trying to get people against each other for some sort of whatever agenda, rather than it is being a real issue. Because in real life, I've never had a woman that I've interacted with just completely diss me in any form or way just because they were anti-man, nor have I really seen a guy in real life do the same thing to a woman because he just hates all women. That's more of just, I feel like it's more of just something you see on like media than you actually see in real life. Like I said, I don't see like
Yeah.
an incredible amount. I don't see an incredible amount of validity to it in practice in real life. Online, though, it happens all the time.
It's definitely been amplified way out of proportion by the media, specifically, like YouTube and content like that. But I think that there is this dynamic between men and women where it's like a woman sees a man act in a immoral way, say they're sleeping around with a bunch of women, cheating, whatever it happens to be. And instead of the woman's response being like, well, I need to find another man and maybe look for better, more virtuous men, instead it's like a reactionary thing where they're like, well, if this man is going to cheat on me, then I'm going to cheat on all these other men and I'm going to go sleep around. And then it goes vice versa. You have men that are like, oh, well, all the women are just a bunch of, insert whatever derogatory term about women.
There's a lot of
So, so I'm just going to treat them like they are and not really try to develop any deeper relationship with them and just treat them like pieces of meat. And so it's just this cycle that goes back and forth where each side is just blaming the other side and nobody is standing up for what is right.
I feel like this ties in like the whole sexual weakness thing, because I think where you see a lot of this issue, like you said, it comes to like sexual immorality, like how we perceive other people based off, like body counts, whether they've cheated on a person before, even whether they've been cheated on before as well. I would argue it really kind of shows the insecurity in people that when they have, like you said, there's a reactionary aspect to it. Whenever you have something happen to you, you really take that in deep, and it ends up with you lashing out against other people in like a weird way of spite. I had this person cheat on me, so now I feel like I'm justified in cheating on other people. I know this person has a big body count. I'm going to validate me through whatever sexual means. Anytime I see anybody of the opposite gender that's being sexually immoral, I'm going to call them out on it because I have my own insecurities about sexual immorality,
Yeah, and in this cycle, somebody has to take responsibility. I think at the end of the day, that responsibility does fall on the man because, men are called to be leaders by God. And
in modern society, men are the ones that like go out of the way to engage with women in like the romantic aspects. Like we are the ones that are set to call up on the woman first, to set up a date, to have it, paid for, planned out, drive them everywhere. It's just a common thing in modern society for men to be that driving force. So I agree that upon the masculine role, it is our responsibility to make these changes. Like if you're not satisfied with the dating culture, look how you contributed personally. I think is a big thing. Look at how the other men in your life have contributed to it personally. Like obviously, I think we all know people that have gone through these games of just random hookups and treating women poorly or vice versa, women treating men poorly and the same thing. It's a culture thing that you foster. If you want to see something better come out of it, then you have to be responsible for your own actions. And I think it's valid to call other people out for their actions as well. I know it's really funny to hear about your homie sleeping with some girl and then ghosting her completely after. But I think that I don't think that should be normalized at all. In a sense, I think within some circles it is normalized. That's why you see a lot of people really disliking, me personally, really disliking the current dating culture, because it's like a weird cycle of making yourself vulnerable, realizing you made yourself vulnerable, and then disliking it. So you just cut yourself off from the other person. And now everybody has issues with that. They have issues with people of the other gender because there's no trust, there's no responsibility, there's no perpetuation of good, faithful action, and just trying to be a real, honest person with somebody.
Yeah, and I think the change that we really want to see in the dating culture starts with men just treating women with more respect, being what is the word? Chivalrous, if you will. Not to the point of my lady, but
Let me put my coat on this puddle so you can step on it.
Exactly, yes. Well, no, it starts with the way that men are interacting with women. So you really need to control the way that you're doing that. But the other aspect of it is you need to be looking for women in the right areas. You don't want to be going out to the club with all these women who are likely not going to be looking for long-term relationships and probably don't share your values if you're listening to this podcast. But, you want to be looking in the right areas. Use your common sense.
For sure. Not to say that you can't find somebody worthy in an environment like that, but the people that regularly go to those environments are oftentimes, just like inebriated, might be drug using of some other kind, and are just kind of looking to do something frivolous and fun. And that's, there's not really a lot of longevity in it. It's more of those dopamine hit sorts of things. The environment in which you find somebody can mean a lot. I would say if you meet somebody in that context that you do end up vibing with, just feel it out slowly, get to actually know that person and see what's up. From my own personal experience, I found it difficult to find longevity in women that I've met in those environments, but that doesn't mean that it's not completely possible, but it is something you have to be responsible for. And again, I think this is an issue that I think primarily falls in the man's hands to do better. I have heard countless stories from women with men having these very grotesque approaches to them or just treating them terribly. Not to say that women don't do the same in some, but I've heard a lot more of the men doing it than the women. And that also just stems from the fact that, like I said before, men are the ones culturally that do the approach. So just be composed and be responsible and honest in your approach and what you're looking for. And I think that could do a lot to help change what's going on.
Yeah, and I think in all of these things that we've spoken about today, self-control, it really comes down to self-control. You want to control yourself in your interactions with women, control what you are spending your money on, control what you're giving your attention to, how you treat your body. And, as Christians, we have the Holy Spirit to rely on with these things. So rely on God, use self-control, and I wish you all the best. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Please send us your thoughts, suggestions, and criticisms at masculinespiritpodcast@gmail.com. We both look forward to continuing this amazing journey together, and I hope you all have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Finding strength in submission, that's the mission. Breaking chains of tradition, new position. Walking in his vision, divine commission. This is masculine spirit, listen. Started as a boy with a heart full of questions, seeking validation through worldly possessions, learning wrong lessons about masculine expression. Depression hit heavy with painful suggestions that I wasn't worthy, wasn't making impressions, till I found his message and started progressing. Through every blessing and every testing, now I'm addressing the lies I was festering. Stand up, warrior, it's time to rise. Let his light shine through your eyes. Every battle makes you rise. This is where your spirit flies. Yeah, this is where your spirit flies. See, the thing about manhood, it isn't in muscles, though I built them daily through physical struggles, deeper than hustles and temporary puzzles. Spirit was muzzled till Christ came to shuffle my priorities, showing me purpose is foundational, rational, factual, but still inspirational, national, global, yet still congregational, building generational wisdom, that's operational. Finding strength in submission, that's the mission. Breaking chains of tradition, new position. Walking in this vision, divine commission. This is masculine spirit, listen. Biblical principles, giving me clarity. Carrying wisdom through all this disparity. Apparently strength isn't measured in scarcity. Rapid with charity, prayer, sincerity. Finding the warrior spirit inside of me. Guided by a light that was hiding inside of me. Pride had to die for this ride to be righteous. See, Christ had to rise for this life to be bright in me. Sometimes we fall, we fall, we fall. Sometimes we crawl, we crawl, we crawl. But through it all, we hear his call, his call. Building walls, building, standing tall, standing, breaking falls, breaking for our brothers, yeah. Brothers, we stronger when walking together, whether the weather is stormy or better. We measure our treasure in spiritual leather and never say never to heavenly preference. Learning to lead when we're serving the least of us. Freeing the beast while releasing the priest in us. Seeking increase while defeating was keeping us. Chained to beliefs that are deeply deceiving us. Stand up, warrior, it's time to shine. Let your light lead down the line. Every brother by design. This is where our spirits climb. This is where our spirits stand as a beacon for the brothers still seeking. Show them strength isn't weakness when you're down on your knees. Every trial that tested me, every mile that pressed in me, built the man God blessed in me. Now I'm walking in destiny.